All right, and welcome back. In case you're joining us now, this is the newsroom, and we're looking at how safe your data is, your personal data. And this is in light of the recently launched NIMS and Huduma number. And in studio, we have Dan Aminga, we have Evans Ofula, and Dr. Fernando Angila. Now, before we took the break, Dr. Fernando, the question was to you, and it was in regards to how safe and how personal data that the government has collected is meant to be personal. Is it guaranteed that that information remains personal and is my information and cannot be shared unless I have given consent?
Your data in terms of your information is private and it's secure from government perspective. We have acts that have been in place for a long time that take care of this. We have Access to Information Act, and then you have the Kenya Information Communication Act, and on top of that, the Constitution. And we are having about 12 registries sitting in different places. That is the point whereby the government has come in to bring all these things, all this data together. When you have 12 registries spanning in all the places, and some of them might be in hard copies, which could get lost. Others are in different formats, in databases, in different areas. And those institutions who hold this data, the 12 institutions who hold this data, are the ones who are supposed to follow the Access to Information Act and the Constitution to make sure that the data is private. And just to explain something, privacy, data privacy, relates to the rights for someone to control their personal data.
Correct.
And then the security, which refers to the personal information protection. And the biggest part where government comes in is protecting this data and at the same time creating privacy for you. If you want to access your own data, you can access. And that's why you're seeing the biometric is coming in. Identity theft is becoming a reality in Kenya.
Absolutely.
We have come a long way, and all government institutions and private have gone aggressive on the digital sector. We've gone very aggressive, such that we have even DCI, that is the police, are registering people online through eCitizen, taking certificate of good conduct. You have to go to DCI and take your fingerprint the old-fashioned way, whereby you get ink on your hands for those people who've gone for the certificate of good conduct. Now, with the NIMS coming up with the biometric identification, you'll apply for that certificate of good conduct and not have to go there and line up and take the inked old format biometrics. So with time, you'll see this being a good thing in terms of creating ease of doing business for a Kenyan, and also identification and killing the identity theft that is going on.
There's no doubt that the idea is good. There's no doubt that even if you look at, say, for instance, the United States, where they have the national social security number, that this is the way we need to go. Even in terms of if there was an accident, it would become very easy to identify who this person is, where they live, and their relatives and all that. It just disseminates information easily. The only bone of contention for many Kenyans is the privacy of that data. I'll use a bank as an example. If I went to a bank and I stored my information there, two things happen. If that money was withdrawn illegally, the bank would not even bother telling me it was withdrawn illegally. They will literally compensate me my money. Now, what assurance do we have with government that once they have this information, it remains private? And secondly, there's an article which we showed there of data that went missing in Machakos. And this was purely because it had been put in a tab. The system that has been used was such that the information was not accessible. What stops somebody, for whatever reason, using the delete button on me as, delete you and you're non-existent when it comes to the system, for whatever reason?
I want to say that this was a misinformation from the Machakos area. How this Huduma number process is ongoing, there's a tablet that is used to capture people's biometrics and other information. After the day is finished, there's a transmission of data over a private network. And when you transmit the data goes out of the tab.
Wait, let me just slow down a little bit here and go a little bit technical. When they take this information on the tab, where is it stored? Is it on a server? Is it stored on an SD card? Where is it stored?
At the end of the exercise during the day, it's stored on the tablet,
on that tab.
On the tablet when the registration is going on. After the registration is complete, a submit button is accessible for the person registering. And when they do submit, it goes through a private network, virtual private network, that is from the Ministry of Interior to the servers. And when that goes, then the tab is taken for charging with no data in it.
Okay, so at the point where it's going to the office, back to the office,
yes,
there's absolutely no data in that tab. It has already been uploaded to a server.
Yes, and confirmations are done from the data, from the tab. The tabs are also serialized, and you know which tab and how much it has transmitted to the servers.
Okay. Yeah. Wafula, you look like you have a question that you'd like.
I think Dr. is becoming a bit insincere with a lot of information. He has been very clear. I think we're not talking about only data protection, but data management itself. If you look at, for example, even the president has said that they're able to get some ghost policemen. I think this data will be accessed in terms, especially security. And they have actually said very in public that we will be able to nab or to capture people who have committed crimes within the country, but we are not able to get them using. So it's so honest to tell the public that yes, we will have access to your information at will. Your information, it's not only going to be protected to the sense that everybody thinks that this information is on lock and key. It is good to say that this information will be accessed, especially in countries where this information is working, is accessed by spy agencies and security agencies. They are able to go into the database and collect information at random. They can also use it to profile people. So I think it's honest when you say that this information is not only for provision of services, but it's also for security purposes, so that Kenyans will know that I'm giving my information anytime. Anybody who has interest in me, if I'm declared a person of interest, my information will be accessed. It's not only for banking. It's not only for getting driving licenses or getting birth certificates. It's specifically and purely also for security purposes. And it's good to tell Kenyans that.
Okay, and I'll come to you, Dan, your data protection specialist. Do you feel the system being used is up to date and up to speed in terms of technology? Here we are with a tab that stores your information. Not sure how much access that tab has or can be hacked or not hacked, but then stored on an SD card, then after that uploaded onto a server. Do you feel that is, in terms of technology, is that foolproof?
Yeah, I think so. The infrastructure that has been put in place by the government is sufficient. The infrastructure looks good because someone has a tab which has a serial number, unique serial number. So when you input the data into that tab, at the end of the day, it's transferred to the government databases. To that end, that infrastructure looks good because once you go back to charging the tab, that is at night, you do not have anybody's information in that tab. That one looks good so far. My concern would be at the database end. What structures are we put at the database end? How secure is it at the database end? Because that is where now the whole game begins. Now you see all the data will be seated on that database. How many people have access to that database? I've gone through the bill. There are principles guiding the data protection. In one of the principles, they say that data will be accessed by the security experts and anybody can be able to access the data. So the access that they have to the database, how big is that access they have to the database? That's the question that we need to answer. And because Dr. is here, maybe needs to explain to Kenyans the access that the other agencies have to that main names database. That's where the concern is.
So, yeah.
So this database sits with the Ministry of Interior, number one. Then number two, what is not maybe clear to all of us is that this is a phased out project that will be continuous. What we've started is by collecting data in terms of registering people. Phase 2 will be validating that this information given by the Kenyans who came to register is correct. And how this is going to be done, if you have given a situation that you have a driver's license number or a KRA PIN, then at that point in phase 2, we'll do validation with the existing database registries in different areas. If you've given your birth certificate, we'll make sure that the registry of the births and deaths also confirms that you're actually the same person who has registered. Because we are not going to use this NIMS database immediately. Phase 2 will be after the 45 days. We've already done 22 days. We will do now validation of the people who have registered. And remember, we have done quite a number of Kenyans.
And then comes in the question, fine, you'll do the validation, but let's take minors, for example.
Yes.
With me, you can have my NSSF number, my NHIF number, my ID number, because I have those documents.
Yes.
But with minors, they don't have. The only thing they have is a birth certificate.
Yes.
So what stops me from bringing a child now and stating that this is child X, bringing the same child tomorrow for whatever reason, if somebody had an ulterior motive, and telling you this is child Y, yet it's the same child?
Now, the validation will confirm all this. If I brought the same person with the same information, that validation will come in place. But just to say something, this is a continuous exercise. After the 45 days, there will be people who will be deceased, there will be people who will be born. It is continuous. It is not a project that comes after 45 days, then it ends. After 45 days, the chiefs will remain with the gadgets. They have learned how to use them. And if there are births, that's the point now of reporting in registration. If there are deaths, that will be the point of registration. And it is an immediate, when you register today, it's an immediate update on all government entities that use that information. And this is about identity. Yeah.
Michael, I think, thank you for his clarification that this is a continuous process. And that was really critical for Kenyans to know that there's no any time pegged on this process. So people should feel safe that there's no, the 45 days or 30 days.
You're not locked out.
Are not locked out. That's very important. But I think you're not answering what he's asking and what I'm asking. It's about access to this data. For example, security agencies that will have access to this data. The process of collecting the information, verifying, we know very clear that that will happen, and it will happen in a better way or in a good way. But the people who have access to this information, to what extent what information will they have access to what extent, and how sure are Kenyans that this information that they will have access will not be misused or abused? That's the guarantee that Kenyans need to know. Because if you say that the Ministry of Interior, and of course knowing the agencies within that ministry, will just randomly go into any information they want and try to pull out or profile or try to use it in a manner they would want to use, that's the guarantee that Kenyans need to know, because I think that's the primary purpose.
Right. And maybe to hear from Dan before we come back to you, so that if in case he has the same concerns, you raise them. Dan?
Yeah, on the principles guiding the data protection of the bill, they were saying that before your data is accessed by any agency, you need to be informed and you need to give consent. You need to tell Kenyans that that is going to happen, because this is the question that many Kenyans are asking. If they're going to access my data today as Dan, for example, am I going to be asked and told that, Dan, your data is about to be accessed by this agency, and this is the reason that your data is about to be accessed? That one happens in the EU region. They have come up with very good data protection laws, and that is why people are so comfortable. And even the Google and Facebook, they find it very hard to mess up with data in that part of the world. Is it going to be the same in Kenya? That is a concern that Kenyans have.
It's going to be the same. Remember, you're a developing country, and we are taking these steps towards a unified protection of databases. Remember, I said that we have a lot of databases, the biggest ones being 12 of them, that are sitting in different areas, and it's worse when they're like that, because Kenyans should be very afraid when they don't know what NHIF is doing with their data, NSSF is doing with their data. But right now, the government is bringing them into one portal, all this data, and protecting them such that these other entities will be using that, but using it under the Data Protection Act when it comes, Data Protection Bill when it comes into an act. And remember, right now what we are doing is doing registrations and validating. And before we start consuming that database that we are calling names, before it starts being consumed by different agencies, the law will be in place, and we'll make sure, you've seen the law, it is actually very robust. Once it's in place, then we will be good to go. Remember, you have a Cybercrime and Misuse Act that is in place already. So, but all these things are digital.
Okay, and the question still not answered is, as much as this is my private personal information before an agency accesses it, and this could be a government agency, do they inform me? I'll take an example of a home. My home is private, and even the police, even if they're to come into that home, they have to get a search warrant. They cannot just walk in because it's a private home. Now, with the data that is on that server, is it that private to the extent that if a certain agency needed to access, for instance, KRA, needed to access my information, my personal data, then I have to be informed, and they need a formal document that shows that they have authority to search or to have access my data?
Most of these requests come from the owner. Remember, it's about privacy. I don't know your name, I don't know your ID number, I don't know anything. If I went to work, I have got no reason doing anything. But if you came to seek for a certain service and gave out your ID number, that's when I call. And I call with your permission. So calling that database, not KRA would not come and call on Huduma to check on you for anything. But it will only be realized when you come with something to do with the KRA. That's when they will call. So it's
but what I'm asking is, how sure am I that it is private to the extent that my consent will be sought by whichever agency, by whoever, before they access it? Not after, before they access it. And I need to give them the authority. I need to know that my data is being accessed.
Currently, all government arms, when they need to access any data of an individual, you come with a warranty. You come with a written notification that you want to look for this information. If you go to NTSA, for example, and you want to look for a car that is lost or something like that, or a driving license, you have to come with a court order, or you have to come with something written that asks us to give that information through consent.
I think that you're not dispelling the fear that the government is likely to spy on its citizens using this kind of data or information. And we need to be very clear and give the public confidence that we are not going to be spied on. We remember even mobile phone registration. People feared that they're going to use it to spy on them. And remember, Kenya has surpassed Nigeria in terms of mobile telephony data availability. So I think we need to be very clear that it is not going to be used to spy on citizens. I mean, it's not about warrants, Michael. I mean, we know that when you want to access information or to break even to get into somebody's house, you got to get for warrant. But these are information that they are sitting with this information. They don't need a warrant to go and just say that we want to go to the database to collect information about Evans Wafula, even without my consent. So you need to dispel that, not another way of spying on the public.
The government has been very transparent in doing this exercise. Number one, that's why it's being done in the open up to the sublocation. If the government was in the exercise of spying on Kenyans, we wouldn't have done this project this way. You will have just had something is going on with the current sitting databases. And if it's about spying, you can use the current sitting databases in the 12 institutions to spy on people. But that's not the plan for government to spy on its Kenyans. That's not the plan at all.
All right, gentlemen, we'll need to wind up. We only have a few minutes, so I'll give you a chance to have your closing comments. I'll start with you, Dan Aminga. Are there any concerns that you feel Kenyans need to highlight before we let the government go ahead with it? Okay, it is voluntary, it is not forced, but are there any concerns that you'd feel should be raised?
Yes, one of the concerns that I feel Kenyans should ask the government is what Dr. Evans did not answer very well is my consent has to be given before the data is accessed. I would want Dr. Evans and the government agencies, even the Interior Ministry,
Dr.
Wangila, to dispel the fear that Kenyans have that I'm going to give out my data to you, personal data, which is very personal to you. This data is going to be safeguarded. And anytime someone wants to access this data, they must get consent from me before they access that data. That is my concern.
Right.
But lastly, in support of Huduma number, it's a noble idea. For us to move to a digital age, digital transformation, we need this unique identifier so that I'm able to know everybody is able to be identified uniquely. It's an idea whose time has come. We need to go ahead with it. Maybe we need to pass that bill to accelerate for it to become law, so that Kenyans have confidence that their data is safe.
All right, Evans Wafula, your closing comments?
I think it's critical for the media, as he has also put it, that this is a continuous process. The media need to really hype that. Another important issue is that I think we are all in support of Huduma as a media, and I think the media has really done a lot in terms of trying to talk about this number. It's the equivalent of the social security number. Very good for service provision. But also I think the government need to be very, very careful and clear to let people understand that this is not going to affect their privacy or their private lives. And if people have to be spied, then let people be informed so that people know that this information goes, or the number goes beyond service provision, but can also be used for security purposes. And you have really pointed out that this is also for security reasons. So it doesn't then become difficult for you to tell Kenyans that also for security purposes, we might be able to access your numbers or use them.
Dr. Wangila, you get the final word.
Yeah, so we thank the 14 million Kenyans who've registered, and for those people who have seen that form, you can see it's voluntary and it assures you of your data protected, that your data is going to be protected. And looking forward in the near future this year, we should have the data protection bill coming into an act, making sure that now, before we go to full blast usage of that database, we already have an act in place. So out of supposedly about 45 million Kenyans, 47 million Kenyans, when you have 14 million Kenyans who've registered, then they have trust in the government. 14 million Kenyans is a good number to trust in
All right,
government.
thank you very much, Dr. Fernando Wangila, who's in the Ministry of Interior, also in the Secretariat of NIMS, Evans Wafula, who's a journalist, and last but not least, Dan Aminga, who's a data protection specialist. Thank you for joining us this morning on the newsroom. For your participation online, I'm going to be reading your comments as we carry on, but do keep the conversation going online. That's where we wind up newsroom this morning. For now, we take